Good morning and welcome to Neuro 279 Introduction to Neuroscience. I'm Dr. Mary, and the purpose of this video is to run through the syllabus so that we can do this outside of class. And this should prepare you for taking the syllabus quiz, which is due Wednesday after the start of class, Wednesday night. So if we look at the syllabus, the first thing that you should see at the top is all of my contact information. The best way by far to get a hold of me is by this email address, jmary@francis.edu. I do have this phone number, however, that you can also take advantage of, but I would strongly encourage you, I don't always even notice if there is a voicemail on it, so please follow up any calls with an email if you don't get a hold of me. My office is in Science Center 109. And I have office hours from 11 to noon pretty much every day. There may be a few Tuesdays or Thursdays when I could be off campus, but if so, I will have office hours by Google Hangouts. That will be a pretty rare thing, though. It's almost certain that I think I would be there almost every day, and I'll try to give you a warning if I'm not going to be there and will instead do virtual office hours. This is, I think, a really fun course. So this is the Introduction to Neuroscience course in that this is kind of the foundational course for the Interdisciplinary Neuroscience minor. And that's probably why a lot of you are taking it. It also is a course that can be taken as part of the Movement Science minor. This course is really meant to set up, and in a lot of ways, is meant to set up the neuroscience seminar, which is intended to be taken by seniors. It's sort of a senior level course, although some people will be taking it concurrently with this course. In that this course is meant to lay the foundation for the whole field of neuroscience. And really what we're going to be doing in this is sort of the biological end for the most part of neuroscience. In part that's because that fits my wheelhouse, but also because I think it sets up the framework for everything that comes at sort of higher levels, more of the psychological levels. So we're going to be basically starting, if you look down here under course goals, we're going to be starting at the level of neurons. We're going to work our way up into how sensory systems work, how movement control works, and then we'll try to do some information or some content that's more on sort of higher level cognition, including a section on mental illness later on in the semester. As far as the course requirements go, you are going to be required to have this book, Neuroscience Exploring the Brain. You only need the book. You do not actually need the online materials. I asked the bookstore several times to remove that information from the listing, but I haven't been able to successfully get them to do so. So you just really need the hard copy of the book, and you aren't going to need the electronic versions. However, there are ebook versions, and you're welcome to use those if you think that that would work for you. Attendance is expected, and I will be taking attendance through the Canvas attendance app. There are no points directly associated with attendance, but if you miss and you don't have an excused absence, you will lose credit for quizzes or exams or assignments that are associated with that class. So for example, if there's a homework assignment that's discussed that day and you're not there and you don't have an excused absence, you will receive a 0 for that assignment even if you do turn it in. Late arrivals, failure to participate, early departures, those also constitute absences. Now, if you do have an excused absence, so for example, if you're an athlete and you're traveling for a competition, or if you are sick at the last moment, or have car trouble, or get snowed in, what have you, we can work around those, and you can have an excused absence. I can work with you on this, but the key thing is you need to communicate with me immediately and in a timely fashion. So if you're sick, you should be contacting me that day. Ideally within a few hours of missing the class. If you know that you're going to be missing ahead of time, so for example with an athletic competition or some other university related function, you should contact me as, at least roughly a week ahead of time so that we can make accommodations and anticipate that absence. I do use Canvas pretty heavily. Canvas is used to not only distribute all the PowerPoint slides that I use, but also for a lot of assignment submissions. So for example, pretty much all the homework, with a few exceptions, will be submitted on Canvas. The quizzes will be also issued through Canvas. So Canvas is going to be an important portion of the course, or an important vehicle for the course. It is also the main way that I'll make any kind of announcements for the course. And therefore, please do check the announcement system on a daily basis, because that's the only way that I will be communicating with you outside of class time. I'll give you a tour through our Canvas site in a little bit once we get to some other parts of the course. I do habitually do screencasts, so I will record whatever is presented on my computer screen, so usually that's going to be the PowerPoint slide. And also I record audio with a lapel mic. And so I will be posting those on a routine basis throughout the semester, so you can always go back and re-watch a lecture if you wish to do so. Or if you are going to be missing for some sort of an excused, justifiable reason, this is a way that you can help yourself keep up with the course. The way you access those is you click on this link that's provided here that takes you to a YouTube playlist. The playlist is public. My individual videos are unlisted, but by clicking on this playlist, you should be able to get access to all the videos that pertain to our course. And again, I try to post those same day if I can. Occasionally I get a little bit behind, but if there's ever a video that you're waiting on, please feel free to ping me, and I'll get it up as soon as I can. It usually just means that I got swamped with other things, but usually I can get them up within a day or two of the actual class meeting. Homework assignments. So homework assignments will be given through Canvas, and the way I like to do homework assignments is that I will be giving, for most chapters, I'll be giving you a series of short answer questions, something like 4, 5, 6 questions or so. And your job is going to be to read the textbook, and often read sections of the textbook that we have not covered in class, and then write responses to those homework questions. And then you submit them onto Canvas. These are graded mostly just for completeness and effort. They're worth 5 points each, but they do have to be submitted on time by the start of class. So if you submit them late after class begins, if you submit a file that is not the correct file name, or you submit a blank version of the documents, you're going to get a 0 for that particular assignment. Because really, again, all you have to do is actually give it a good college try, and you get full credit for it. What we'll do, though, is that, and the reason that I do require them to be submitted by a certain time, is that you'll bring your answers into class, and we'll have a discussion in class about those homework questions. So you'll talk in small groups, talk out answers. I will then randomly assign students or ask students to volunteer sort of an initial answer for each of the questions, and we'll talk about them as an entire class as well. I find this to be a pretty effective means of having an alternative way of covering material. So sometimes we're going to be covering material in the homework questions that we're not going to be covering in the more traditional lecture part. And I think some types of questions, especially the ones you really have to think about, I think work better in this kind of a homework format. So that's the purpose of this portion of the assignment. And probably about 1/3 of our class time will be devoted to discussions of these homework questions, and the other 2/3 or so will be devoted to more of a traditional lecture format. In addition to the homework assignments, there will also be scientific paper summaries that we'll be doing. I'm doing this, I have done in the past, term papers. Given the size of our class, I've decided to change it to this assignment. But the idea is that you're going to be asked to write 2 one-page summaries of 2 primary literature articles in neuroscience that are relevant to some kind of a neuropathology, some sort of neurological disorder. They need to be published in the last 10 years. They need to be manipulative experiments. So that means where there's some sort of an experimental group that has been altered in some way by the researchers. They're not just sticking people in MRI machines and then measuring them. They're actually manipulating these people or manipulating these mice. Oftentimes some of the animal work is some of the best. Or whatever the situation is. They could be just working on cells and cell culture, but they're doing some kind of manipulation. They're providing a drug, they're doing some kind of other manipulation, and then taking measurements from that. And they have to both be relevant to the same kind of disorder. So you'll have one that's due mid-semester, another one that's due towards the end of the semester, and the specific due dates are in the schedule that's on the very end of this syllabus handout. Also, another consideration is that the second of these 2 proposals has to involve molecular methods. And that's because I want to get you used to reading some papers that have some molecular methodologies. It doesn't mean that the whole paper is nothing but molecular work, but there's got to be some sort of an assessment of some kind of a molecule. So usually this is going to be involving measurements of protein or DNA or RNA, and you have to be able to explain what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it in a very concise manner that'll fit within this sort of one-page summary format. I'll provide more information on how to do that later on in the semester. There will be periodic quizzes and exams. I try to give quizzes for most chapters except maybe the last chapter before each exam. And those quizzes will be administered online via Canvas. They're usually 10 questions, multiple choice. You have 10 minutes to do them, and they're worth probably about 5 points. They're open note because they are taken outside of class, but they are to be done by yourself. This is done on honor system, but these are individual assignments. You're not allowed to talk to other people about the content of the quizzes, even after you've completed the quiz, because the other person may not have completed the quiz yet. There will also be 3 exams. There's 2 midterms and there's a final. I don't tend to have these be substantially cumulative, but there certainly is inevitably some content that builds upon other content in the semester. So after we get done with our first unit, which is mostly focused on the level of the neuron, you can't forget what a neuron is or what a synapse is, or what a neurotransmitter is when we move on to subsequent chapters. But I won't be going back to the initial exam and trying to play get you with early content. Exams tend to be multiple choice, matching. There'll be some fill in the blank for vocabulary, and there'll be inevitably some questions that just I can't shoehorn into those other formats, and they'll end up in this short answer, drawing, labeling kind of a section. I say short answer, but they really are short answer. Right? You rarely are going to be asked to ever write more than a sentence or two to answer any particular question. There's certainly not going to be any like half-page or full-page essays. You need to be able to remember and explain lecture content. You also need to be able to apply the concepts that we're learning to new situations. So this is a class that requires a fair amount of learning and understanding in great depth content so that you can then apply and think about that content. I think everybody, for example, should learn something when you're taking an exam. And that's something that you'll have to do as part of this course. Exam content is going to be based on the lecture as well as the homework assignments. So if we don't cover stuff that's in the textbook, so for example, there's a lot of history in Chapter 1 that we're not going to cover, you aren't going to be responsible for that. As much as I would love to be able to talk about it, we're going to focus on other things. So your homework and your lecture notes should be your primary study resource. I also do make study guides available as study aids, and I hope they are helpful. But again, focus on your homework, focus on your lecture notes as your main study resources. So based on all of that, this is how the course kind of breaks down. There will be roughly somewhere in the vicinity of about 100 points in terms of homeworks and quizzes, usually 1 homework assignment and 1 quiz for every chapter or thereabouts. There'll be a few chapters that won't be true, but most of them it is true. I tend to have 2 scientific paper summaries that are both worth that are going to be worth 15 points each. There'll be 2 midterms. There'll be a final exam. The final exam is a little bit longer and does have a little bit more points associated with it for a total of about 455 points. The main variable there is that I never quite know how many homework and quizzes there will be. It sort of goes with the ebbs and flows of the semester. But what you do is you basically take the total points that you earn, divide by the total possible points, and that'll give you a percentage. And you can convert your percentage into a letter grade based on this scale. And this is the scale that we'll be using in the course. Before I go any further, I do want to pop over to Canvas to give you a quick tour of that. So let me do that. Pause. Okay, here we are back in Canvas. This is sort of an early version of Canvas for the course, but I'll be publishing this momentarily once I post the video. But what you can see when you get onto Canvas is there'll be a short menu over on the side here. I tend to whittle this down a little bit because you won't need all the various bits of information. But the first thing you should probably do when you get on here is click on the Syllabus button, and this will open up the syllabus, and it should auto-open for you. So you can read along with this video and see all this content. And I will update the syllabus as needed throughout the course of the semester. Most of the critical information, though, is going to be found within this modules section. And so it's within the modules section that you'll find, for example, there's a general course information section that'll have a link to this video that you're watching right now, as well as the syllabus quiz, which again is going to be due Wednesday night. And there's a link to my YouTube playlist directly here. So this is, if you don't go through the syllabus, you can click right here, and this will take you to my YouTube playlist. Down here, though, is where you get into the real heart of the course. So this is Unit 1, and thus far I've only posted information for Chapters 1 and 2, but I do post all of my lecture slides, so you would just click, for example, on Chapter 1 lecture slides, and then this would provide you with access to 2 different files. They'll usually be a PowerPoint file and a PDF file. These have exactly the same content in them. The PDF is just sort of pre-formatted to print 2 slides per page. So you could click on this, download it, and then what I'd ask you to do is print this and bring this to class and take your notes directly on the PDF. That way you don't have to be scrambling to write down everything I say. I find this to be a pretty effective method for a lot of people, and so this is what I recommend that you do. I'm certainly not going to require it. I'm not going to provide actual hard copy printouts. I'm going to ask you to produce those on your own. In addition to having, let me click back into modules, in addition to having lecture slides on here, I also will post the homework. So for example, this is the Chapter 2 homework. And when you come in here, there's this document. This is the main homework document. So you'll download this, save it to your hard drive somewhere, and then type out answers, and then you need to save. And it's critical that you save, because otherwise you'll just upload a blank document. Save, and then click on Submit Assignment in order to submit your file after you've done so. And again, the key thing is that as long as you submit it and put in good effort, you'll receive full points for the assignment. You just have to submit it by the due date, which is provided right here. In this case, there are 2 supplementary documents. So you'll see this is an Inner Life of the Cell worksheet, which has to do with question 1, and then one of the subsequent questions asks you to read the abstract of this scientific paper. So what I'm going to ask you to do, therefore, is download this paper and refer to it, read it when you're answering these questions. You don't have to turn in anything related to these directly. You just have to use these when you're answering the questions that are here in this document. The other thing, of course, you'll see is the syllabus quiz. There'll be other quizzes that will appear down here in Unit 1 as we start to move through the material. Again, all the quizzes are given on Canvas. You would click on this. When you're ready, you would take the quiz. This question, or this quiz, the syllabus quiz is not timed, but again, all the other quizzes this semester will be timed. You'll usually have 1 minute per question to answer the quizzes. So they're open book, but you probably also don't have time to read through all and look up every single question. So I do encourage you to study for these and take them seriously as a way to sort of encourage yourself to stay on top of your studying, and also find out if you're not understanding a particular batch of material. It allows you to identify that hopefully before you get to a real exam. You also will be able to click on grades to see your grades, and this is the grade book that I use. Therefore, you should always be paying attention to what is reported in this grade book, and if this ever differs from your records, you should let me know about that right away so that we can talk about it. There's a few other links that are down here. You probably won't need them very much. The quizzes will be posted down here, but you can always get to them through the modules. A list of assignments will be down here, but again, you can always get to them through the modules. The one thing I wanted to show you that I forgot to is that in the syllabus tool, I actually really like this, below the syllabus, there's a nice list down here, a course summary. And so all of the assignments are going to have due dates associated with them, and so this can function as a nice little running tally that will let you know when different assignments are due throughout the semester, and it also will sort of allow you to see your progress throughout the semester. All right, just a few other things to say. Flipping back over the syllabus here. In terms of student support, there is peer tutoring that can be available for this course. I'm not sure if they regularly offer peer tutoring for this course, but we certainly had a lot of students go through it, and therefore if you have desire for a peer tutor, that is something that Center for Academic Success can help set up for you. So you should contact them. This is a direct link to their information. And through them, that you should also be able to find a tutoring schedule. I'm not sure if that's been posted yet, but it will be available soon. There's also the Library Center. The library is very helpful in terms of helping to find research. So when you're doing your paper summaries, if you're having trouble finding a paper, I mean, you certainly can come to me, but you also can take advantage of reference librarians. Here's contact information for them. You can also just go straight into the library and go to the Need Help area right when you enter in the front door, and you should be able to find access to help, to be able to find good research articles that are relevant to something that you might be interested in. If you have disabilities, you probably know the drill, but you do need to work through Ms. April Fry in Accessibility Services. She's in Francis Hall along with the rest of the Center for Academic Success. This is her contact information. Once you submit documentation to her, then she coordinates with you and I, and we work out accommodations for the semester. Some general policies. Disruptive behavior cannot be tolerated. It's not conducive to a good learning environment for the rest of the students. This does include laptops. I find them to be fairly disruptive, so I ask you not to use laptops in class. It's disruptive not only for you, but also for the people around you. And I do the same thing. I bring laptops to meetings, but I actually often will turn on airplane mode when I get into a meeting so that I'm not being bombarded by all kinds of pop-ups and other sorts of things that happen. And so for this reason, I ask you not to use your laptops. There's also a nice link here that discusses that decision about why not to use laptops. I also ask you not to use your cell phones. The one exception to all this is that, certainly when we're doing our homework discussions, you'll probably be referring to your answers on your laptops, and that's just fine. Similarly, I'll sometimes use these Kahoot systems, which is like a little in-class quiz for fun software. And so when we use those, you'll need either a laptop or a cell phone in order to participate. And that again, is just fine. But most of the time during lecture, you will not need to use laptops. I do provide the slides for you to print and bring to class for that very reason, so that you don't need to be jotting down lots of stuff. If you have questions about grading, I'm happy to always talk to you about those. If there is a situation where sometimes emotions get raised right in the heat of the moment, I may ask you to wait a day. That doesn't mean I don't want to talk to you about it, but it does mean that sometimes I think it makes more sense to give it a day, come back and talk about it then, and we can have a more constructive conversation. Otherwise, sometimes more heat than light is generated. In terms of academic honesty, hopefully this is not going to be a problem, but certainly all the quizzes need to be done individually. And if there's ever any evidence that this is not the case, I will certainly be talking to you about that, and we would have to pursue procedures through the university judiciary system. Similarly, when you're writing any kind of assignments in here, particularly the paper summaries, that needs to be individual work, and you need to cite appropriately any sources that you're using. I like to encourage people to use citations as sort of a way to back yourself up, as opposed to just cover your bum. But there is sort of a bum covering approach or reason to use them as well. Grades, as far as incomplete grades, this is just from university policy, and the same is true of the withdrawal policy. The withdrawal deadline this semester is March 28th, and after that time, no withdrawals can be given. Last little bit is just tips and expectations. I guess it's not quite the last little bit. There's two more bits. This is, I think, a challenging course. This is a mid-tier science course, is I think how you should think about this. That doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it does mean that it is challenging, and it's more challenging, for example, than a Bio 111 course. But I think it's certainly something that is manageable, and I think if you do so, if you do these and follow through with these suggestions, it will be easier. So for example, the homework assignments, while I'm just grading them for completeness, I think if you just kind of slack off and put down a few words that you know and you're not really thinking about them ahead of time and just figuring you're going to be able to make it up in the discussion, I think that's kind of a bad approach. I think if you put effort into the homework assignments, you'll be better prepared to get good information from the discussions. So the things you really don't understand and weren't able to get from the textbook, that's when you're learning them. But if there's information you can get from the textbook or by pursuing other sources or talking about it with your neighbors, and you're welcome to work with your friends on these homework assignments, that would be good to do before you get into class, and that way you're well prepared for those discussions and your brain will be sort of primed to take maximal advantage of them. Please get into a study routine for this activity. I think you should be thinking about doing something every day or at least every other day for this particular course. And that might mean you're doing homework, or it might mean you're studying for a quiz, but it also might mean you're just reading along with the semester or with the chapters. I do make heavy use of this textbook, and I try to use the textbook have my lectures use the textbook and be in close cooperation with the textbook so that it's a good resource for you. So I recommend either reading before or after we cover information, depending on your preference. I always sort of prefer to read the textbook after we covered information in lecture. But this allows you to, I think, better get sort of another take on the information. I think it is a very readable book, but they often will present information in maybe a different voice than I will use. So I think getting both of those voices will be helpful. I definitely recommend going back over your notes. If you're just sitting around for 5 minutes before class, one of the best things I think you can do in any class is just pull up your notes from the prior class and read back over them so that your brain is sort of in mode and you're ready to go when it comes to the start of the class. You know what we were talking about and you're ready to think more about those topics. Study groups, I think, can be really helpful. I think and study groups are really helpful when you're doing things like trying to teach one another. So if you, for example, go through the lecture slides one by one, or the figures from the textbook one by one, and take turns explaining those back and forth to each other, I think that can be a very powerful learning device for yourself, in that if you could really explain something to someone else, that means you probably really understand it very well. Finally, when you have questions, please come to my office hours. I am here for you. You should take advantage of me. And my job as your instructor is not to do the learning for you, but I'm happy to do whatever I can to put you in a situation where you can learn. And if that means providing some additional perspective or clarification, I'm always happy to do that. So please come to my office hours. If that won't work, please make an appointment and we'll find another time that does work for you. Dr. Trimble, if you know Dr. Trimble in the biology department, has this line, "It's a marathon, not a sprint." And I think that's a really good way of thinking about this semester. A marathon is something where you have to be consistently working all throughout the entire race. And that's the way I think it should be in neuroscience too. If you're working the entire time, you're going to be in a good situation to succeed in the course. If you just try to sprint the day or two before each exam and blow through all the material, it may be too much and you may not be able to do as well in the course as if you spent consistent time on the course throughout the semester. The last part of the course syllabus is our anticipated schedule. This may vary a bit, but I try to stick to it fairly closely. What you can see is that our first third of the semester is basically focused on what's going on in neurons and as neurons communicate with one another. So what's going on in terms of the membrane of the neuron and then how they communicate with each other. From there, we're going to transition into a section that discusses the structure of the nervous system. So this is more nervous system anatomy in general. And then we're going to focus on sensory systems. And our main sensory systems we're going to talk about are the somatic sensory system, which is like our touch and temperature and pain reception, as well as our vestibular system, which is the system coming out of our inner ear that allows us to know about body position. Once we do that, we'll then start to talk about movement. And that's going to be the basis of the first part of the third semester. So we'll do a spinal control of movement section, a brain control of movement section, and then we have 2 chapters that are getting to more higher order brain functions. So this is more in terms of behavior and cognition, where we're trying to understand brain rhythm, sleep, and what goes wrong when such individuals are dealing with mental illness. I hope you really enjoyed. This is always a highlight of my year to teach this course. There's lots of really fun things that are present in here. I think it is a challenging course, but I think it's also a really fascinating course. And so I'm looking forward to being part of to doing this with you, and I hope you're enjoying and looking forward to being part of it. I'll see you in class. Thank you for watching.